Here they all come.
Here we go.
12, 13.
Good morning, everyone. As we're waiting for everyone to link up to the screen, my name's Andrew Shaw from Felix Software, saying good morning from sunny Brisbane, and I've got Ross Darrah, the founder of Pareto Toolbox, joining me from over in Auckland. So good afternoon to you, Ross.
Afternoon, Andrew.
So guys, while we're waiting for everyone to just to join, I will just launch the first poll just to get a gauge of everyone's understanding. Today we'll be talking about Lean-Agile Procurement, looking at does it work? More importantly, when's the best time to apply it within your procurement function? So you'll see the poll pop up here, and just as we're waiting for everyone to join, if you can just indicate one of the responses there. We'll share these in a couple of slides' time. Cool. And also, guys, just as a bit of housekeeping, so today will be a 30-minute webinar with some question time at the end. If you've got a question, at the bottom in the toolbar, there's a Q&A tab. The questions are anonymous, or well, not anonymous, but they're not seen by everyone. We'll answer the questions as we go towards the end, but any poll responses or questions won't appear on the screen. So feel free to contribute. We want as many questions as possible, and hopefully we get some good conversation going. So just as an introduction as to what we'll be going over today, we'll be looking at what Lean-Agile Procurement is, get Ross's interpretation being the expert in the subject. We'll look at key differences between some traditional approaches and the Lean-Agile Procurement approach, looking at when is the best time, best environment scenario to run Lean-Agile Procurement. We've got a really great case study that Ross has put together from work that he's done recently with Auckland City Council. We'll look at some key takeaways, and Ross has got a special offer for today's participants for some of his upcoming workshops. So before we get into, I suppose, the main event, just a bit of a background on us, Felix, the company that I work for. So we're a Brisbane-based company. We're a technology company that specialises in source-to-contract software. Over the past 6 to 7 years, we've been developing this procurement software. So we develop based on an agile approach to software development and also an agile approach to project delivery. So we really pride ourselves and have seen some great results working with clients, taking an agile approach in sort of being involved early and helping scope out solutions when we've been provided with a problem. And obviously our development's been led by a lot of feedback and market sort of best practices. Ross, I'll throw it to you now. If you can give us a bit of a background as to your experience, where you were introduced to Lean-Agile Procurement, some of the work that you've been doing.
Cool. So thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Ross Darrah, and I work with a company called Pareto Toolbox. I've been involved in procurement in New Zealand and also in parts of Australia, probably since about 1995, when I was employed by Fletcher Challenge as procurement director for one of their subsidiaries, and was fortunate enough to set up a consulting company in New Zealand called Management Toolbox back in '99 that I sold 12 years later to Grant Thornton, and now get a second chance to create a new consulting company to provide advice to our new clients. It was quite telling and pertinent that the difference between the dates of 1999 and 2017 is that there's been a number of changes in the procurement industry and a number of more relevant tools available to help us to reduce total cost of ownership and to also improve the way we manage our suppliers. And those two major ones that we've really found is the access to data and be able to use tools such as Tableau and Power BI to visualize baseline spend and create procurement business cases a lot more visibly, and therefore making decisions easier. But the second thing has been the advent of the world's coming together of Lean, Agile and procurement all into one, which is where I met a gentleman from Switzerland called Mirko Kleiner, who has developed a tool which he calls the Lean-Agile Canvas, which I'll talk about shortly. And this is very much making a difference in the procurement world for us.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll just end this poll now, guys. So if anyone is in there and hasn't responded to the poll, I'll give you about another 5 seconds to do so, 10 seconds to do so. I just thought this would be a great opportunity to get an understanding of what people's exposure has been to Lean Agile procurement, whether it's something that, this is your first experience or you've heard of it. We've obviously seen, we've heard about Lean methodologies from sort of manufacturing background. Obviously, we've got experience as a software company in Agile methodology for software development. And obviously, we're talking to a lot of procurement professionals today. So I'll end this poll and I'll have a look at the results. So, okay, so the vast majority of people have heard of it, but I think a lot of people haven't actually, maybe attended one of these Lean Agile procurement workshops or maybe have practiced it. So that's great. It'll mean that we can really go into looking at what it is and some opportunities that people can maybe take away from today to put it into practice. So in that, I suppose going on from there, Ross, I'll throw over to you. I'd love to hear your interpretation of what is Lean Agile procurement.
Yeah, thanks again, Andrew. It's kind of interesting. There are three words that mean quite separate things, but we're bringing them all together to create this conversation around Lean Agile procurement. If you to show my age, I'm old enough to remember in the late 80s, early 90s, that we used to talk about business process re-engineering, and that has been transformed into lean thinking, Kanban boards, and how do we do continuous improvement in a different way, faster, leaner, more with less, all those type of terms that you guys, I appreciate what it should understand. Then if you add to that the procurement component of it, which is very much, again, become a strategy, speaking in New Zealand, that was sort of came alive in the 80s, early 90s, where organisations realised they started to managing their suppliers in a better way to achieve their business objectives. And then we've also got the new world that's coming in around Agile, which is really a new mindset that is getting people to think in a way how to deliver outcomes. In the Agile world, as you can see, it's all about being the mindset, having the right values defined by principles, and unlimited number of practices. Just to keep this in context, Lean Agile procurement, as we're going to talk about today, is one of those little practices we're talking about. It's not the only one, it's not the panacea that's going to solve everything, but is one way that you can use Lean Agile procurement. The truth is, if you can take and understand the Lean Agile principles, you can use them in different ways, and I might touch on that if I get time in the question and the answer. But the big difference of where this all fits from is based on those four key values about individuals and interactions are more important than process and tools. So we can't hide behind RFP processes, and it's how do we get greater engagement and ultimately collaboration with our customer, with our stakeholders and with our suppliers, as opposed to traditional master servants thinking we've had around negotiation. The one I just skipped also was it's about a practical working solution as opposed to putting together a 150-page business requirements document for someone to read, hopefully understand, interpret, and give you a response. And number fourth principle and key value of this strategy is it's responsive to change. So as I'll demonstrate in the Auckland Council case study, we can keep adapting to change as we get more information that literally comes in minute by minute during that part of it. So that gives you a flavour of where it is, what the core values are. Andrew.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's a great overview, and it's good to see those values and sort of how they relate to procurement. I think what everyone's probably thinking, sitting in their chair at the moment, is, okay, when does that apply for me then? Okay, what potential opportunity can I incorporate Lean-Agile procurement? So Ross, I'll throw to you, and it'd be great to get some more insight into the sort of environment, the sort of team structure or scenarios where this will be applicable.
Absolutely. So if you look at your spend and you look at your opportunities, you've got to segment it in a different way to what you've normally have done. So normal and traditional procurement, you would use the project matrix, but in this new world, we're looking at it and from a different perspective, as you'll see, in about how certain the solution is and how certain the requirements are. So something quite simple, could be stationary, could be electricity, where you actually know what you need and there's only a certain defined solution or product that you can use. Lean-Agile procurement is not applicable for that. You can still use your RFPs, your reverse auctions, or other ways that you can try and do that more leaner. Secondly, you've got that controlled environment of where you've got opportunities in your MRO consumables and other areas that or your OEM suppliers, where you're kind of constrained about what you can do. Lean-Agile procurement doesn't work there. At the top end of it, when you've got uncertain, that's when you're moving into the world of R&D, thinking up new products, new solutions, new ways to do things. Lean-Agile doesn't work there as well. Where it does work is in that middle space that we have some certainty, some but not complete certainty about what we need, but also we have some certainty but not complete certainty about actually how we're going to provide this. So a good example could that be, which is naturally is most of the IT spend. And when I show you the case study from Auckland Council, it's actually about how we find a partner to help with us, our data management strategy. Or it could be a service like simple things like cleaning, facility maintenance. You know what you want, you know what the standard is, but the supplier's got the innovation and the thoughts of how to bring that together. And so hence why there's a nice sweet spot, if you look at that graph, of where this type of solution can work well. Andrew?
Brilliant. Okay, great. At this point, we'll launch our second poll. So now that everyone's seen, I suppose, a good diagram there about and some examples of when it can be used, when it can't be used, the poll that we've got as our second question is, having a think about an upcoming procurement event or an upcoming requirement where potentially the Lean-Agile procurement workshop or Lean-Agile procurement principle could be applied. So while you guys are going through and having a think about that, Ross, might get you to give us a bit more information on sort of what the workshop entails and what it involves from here.
Absolutely. And also probably the good news is, Andrew, we've already got our first question. So it's a simple one, so I can answer it. And yes, all the slides are going to be available from this presentation.
Yes.
So happy for them to be shared.
Yeah, we'll provide the slides. We'll also provide a sort of a summary of the Q&A responses so that everyone can take away Ross's answers as well.
Absolutely. So what is a Lean-Agile procurement event is pretty much the simple question. And therefore, why would you do something like this? Right. At the end of the day, it's all around what we call the canvas. And you can see that on the right side of your screen. That is pretty much the template that you can use to operate and run an event. The good news about it, with using the canvas, these events can be done now in days as opposed to months. So writing a big RFP document, getting it sent out to suppliers, getting to respond, getting to be evaluated, all that can be done in literally a 2-day period, which we'll demonstrate in the Auckland Council case study. The other benefit of this is you get all participants, and that means competitors as well. They're all in the same room. and it actually speeds up decision making and also comparisons. So it becomes a live event that you can actually monitor the behavior of your suppliers, how they're responding, how the chemistry is with them equally as well. That's one of the side benefits of that, is that you actually get to meet the team of people you're going to work with, as opposed to just a sales manager who's doing the flashy presentation, right? It's a way also of adopting, the Lean-Agile methodologies, how to prioritize your work as well. So you have normal things like your Kanban board where questions are asked and captured and clarified as we go through this. Everyone is in the room is empowered to make decisions, and that means people from the supplier side, so they can actually give us advice and solutions as much as our team is from the customer side. The trick to it all that makes it all work is our canvas, but the watch out is this is very powerful and does require you to stay focused and committed to it. As I said in summary, this whole process improves the time to market, helps you make decisions quickly, helps you to evaluate your people and the culture of the suppliers you're working with, saves everyone money, right? As it saves ourselves money, being the customer, because we don't have to write the big RFP, we don't have to get the evaluation team together for a long time, and all the administration associally. But equally, it also saves the suppliers a lot of time. And I'm sure a lot of the people on the webinar know how much time and cost that suppliers have to invest in responding to RFPs. Doing it this way, they still have to be well prepared to come to the event, but then it's 2 days of their life. And then by the end of the second day, they know the outcome and they can move on to other parts of their lives.
Yeah.
And they also can collaborate with us during that period.
Yeah, I think from as a vendor's perspective as well, it's great to be in a scenario like that where you're getting feedback and you're across the process and you can be involved in putting together a solution. So just as from our perspective, but we'll move on to the main event, which is the Auckland Council case study.
How does that poll look, Andrew?
We've got, I'm keeping it open for the moment. We're sort of 50-50 for people who have identified opportunities and people who aren't sure. So if for anyone that hasn't voted, keep the responses coming in. But Ross, let's have a look at this case study.
Exactly, and any questions that can help them clarify that is happy to attempt to answer.
Yep. Okay, brilliant.
Cool. So this is a case study from Auckland Council. It's the largest council in New Zealand, and it's based on a recent event that they ran in June this year. So it's very fresh, very recent, where they were looking to find a supplier who helped them develop their data management strategy. Right. So they knew what they needed, they knew the strategic objective, but weren't totally closed to any particular idea that any supplier could bring to it. So Stephen Horsey, he attended Mirko's workshop, which we ran in the April, and saw this as a perfect scenario, and got his support of his manager, Aaron, and were able to convince the business owner that this was a good idea. I'm pretty much also using that definition of insanity, So, doing the same thing as you did yesterday, but expecting a different result is our simple definition of insanity. So let's do something differently and let's see if we did in a different result. And all credit to Auckland Council. They say, we'll give this a try. You'll see some photos there on the right-hand side. That's actually the event at different stages. They end up with over 50 people coming to it from 3 different organisations, plus the employees from council themselves. But in order to do that, still some of the fundamental events, such as plan, prepare, do, still hold true. And so the first thing you have to do is make sure you're well planned of what you want to do these events. So as I said, the event itself takes 2 days. The evaluation process takes 2 days, but it still takes you a period of time, maybe up to 6 to 8 weeks to be planned and prepared for that. So what Auckland Council did, they put together a request for an expression of interest. They got that drafted pretty much as you would normally do, got it out to suppliers. Then they evaluated the responses and chose 3 suppliers to be invited to the event. The expression of interest, we only had 8 sections in it, and kept it to only an 8-page document. So again, we try to make that lean and enough for suppliers to understand what we're trying to achieve, and also what the process was going to be. We also included some user stories in that particular expression of interest as well, to give them some idea of the business problem we're trying to solve. Naturally, the second P then is about preparation, which is the trick for it all. So once we had shortlisted the suppliers, then we actually had to make sure we're going to actually run this event, and it was going to be run smoothly and done well. So in order to do that, the first thing we did was make sure from the council side, they had the right people in the room, right? And this is important because that doesn't mean we needed the chief executive, right? Or we needed the general managers. We needed subject matter experts who were going to be impacted by the decisions of what we were making during the Lean Agile event, so they could actually ask those hard questions of suppliers at the appropriate level of detail for us to choose the right one. We also then had to hold internal workshops, so our team were well prepared and understood how this was going to work. And then part of doing that was then filling up the right-hand side of the canvas, which you can see there on the screen, which was about what was important for us, what our priorities for us, and then how we were going to select the criteria from there. And then we took a big brave pill, and then we decided to get on and do it. Right? And this workshop at this event was run over 2 days, was facilitated and led, made sure it was following that agile methodology, as I say, and using Kanban principles, Scrum principles during the time, to also manage the backlogs. The information request was put on a Kanban so everyone could understand it. There was different stages that we ran during the 2 days, where the suppliers could actually present their latest findings to us, and then we would vote, and we would share the scores with all the suppliers so they know where they were relative to the other 2 competitors. Right? And then as time went on during the 2 days, suppliers always got a chance to change their results or their feedback based on information the latest information provided.
Cool.
And it worked, right? But it worked on a first principle was making sure we got the canvas working, and it would work quite well. So as you can see on the canvas on the screen now, the left-hand side of what was owned by the competitors or the suppliers who are bidding for this. And for example, they had to tell us what their unique selling proposition is and why we should work with them and select them. As I just said, during the 2-day event, they got time and opportunity to upgrade that and tighten it based as they understand what their requirements were. But as we went through the cycle of evaluation, all the council team got scores supplier in the framework, so as they listened to the feedback they were giving. And we evaluated that twice, recognising of the final score, 75% came to the first round of the weighting, and then 25% came from the second round. As you can see in my notes, one of the reasons why people think Lean Agile events don't work is because you've got competitors in the room and they collaborate with each other and steal each other's ideas. 2 days might sound a long time, but when you're in the room doing this, trust me, this moves very fast, and suppliers don't get enough time to be stealing ideas. They need to be literally agile themselves, thinking fast at how they do things. So the result was we were able to find the right supplier, or which then became a partner that we should work with. And we being the council, were very confident we chose the right party, right? Because we saw them in the end of those 2 days, warts and all. And to be honest, the supplier who we chose was not perfect, right? But we could see that they had some weaknesses, but we just took that as a risk that we would need to mitigate as we implemented our data management strategy. But we discussed those concerns with the supplier and acknowledged they were real, and then what we're going to do with it. Because with the lead up to the whole conversation, the defined decision, everyone had been actively involved. The final commercial negotiation happened very quick, like 30 minutes. Right? Interestingly, as you can see by the pictorial, and this is not accurate, but it gives you some idea, is that the supplier's responses were improved over time. Ironically, in the Auckland Council case study, the leading supplier at the beginning stayed the leading supplier at the end, but the other two did improve and did close their gap over that during that time. Equally, as I say, the internal stakeholders were pleased because they could see this unfolding literally in front of their eyes, and were very comfortable with the result at the end. And ultimately, we also had a better relationship with the supplier because we'd lived through this unique experience.
Okay, brilliant.
No surprise, there's some key learnings that Auckland Council got out of it, and I'm sure if you guys are brave enough to run an event, you will learn and this will improve. One of the challenges that we have with Lean-Agile Procurement at the moment, the term is so new, not everyone knows how to play the game as it should be played. So from a supplier point of view, the more spend, if you like, is put into the market, that people do this in a consistent way, the easier it's going to be. But what worked really well at Auckland Council was we got to know the whole team very well personally. You know, one of the small learnings that they had is that they forgot to give everyone name tags, right? So they didn't actually know who they were, other than you could tell by the way they were dressed, which team they were in, but didn't know their names. But by the end of the second day, that didn't become an issue. What worked well was that there was no opportunity for any generic responses from suppliers because they had to think actively and respond actively to what the conversation was at the time. Most importantly, in a good supply person, we delivered it on time, in full, and spec. And as I say, one of the surprising learnings was suppliers didn't have time to copy each other. You know, what we could do better, you can always have better user stories and test cases to help as part of the evaluation, right? Because we had 50 people in the room, we could have had more facilitators there to keep the conversation moving and coaching the different participants of what they need to do it, because this was a first-time experience for a lot of those people, you know. Again, having the right subject matter experts are in the room is important, as opposed to seniority. Spending more time getting prepared, you know, the good Abraham Lincoln philosophy, if you've got 8 hours to catch down a tree, spend 6 hours sharpening the knife. You can always do more of that, but again, as this becomes, type of strategy becomes more the norm, then that's not going to be such an issue. And don't run these events on a Monday and a Tuesday, because at the end of it, and apologise to the Australians, but in New Zealand we use the word buggered, you know. The guys are really tired at the end of it and makes the rest of the week really long. But there's some big benefits out of this, as I say, and this is sort of the executive summary of the real learnings are that you get to meet real people and you get to have a real conversation and you get to have real results, right? Because it's all done real time, people can be improved. We're very much getting people to think on their feet and see how they respond. And to be honest, within a pressure environment, because once you actually choose the supplier and then you're working in a project, you're going to have those hot pressure environments occur anyway. You know, whether it's at a stand-up or at a steering committee or where you're falling behind on your project plan. And it's good to see how suppliers respond under that pressure, right? Evaluation became very transparent. I have had feedback since that one of the suppliers that missed out, although they were disappointed they missed out, they were very pleased with the process because they could see how it was all unfolding. And they kind of always knew they were coming second, and it transpired that way. Yeah. And I say, the due diligence, if you like, that you would normally do for this type of awarding of contract has been done during the event. Andrew?
Yeah. Cool. Okay, I'll end that poll and we'll have a look at the results. So it hadn't really changed too much. We're still sitting at, as you can see, about just off 50-50. So, which is great. Looks like we've got about 26 people that can identify an opportunity that they could potentially do one of these events or workshops, or just take these principles on board. Ross, I mentioned at the beginning that you've got an offer for the participants today. Do you want to have give us a bit more information on these workshops that you're doing?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is only an offer available to people who support the All Blacks. Right? So unfortunately, the Australian supporters have missed out, and that apologise for that, but that's just been the logistics of actually organising this webinar. And Mirko has been in Melbourne. So Mirko's the master of Lean-Agile Procurement, and he was in Melbourne on Monday and Tuesday running a workshop there. He's actually in Sydney today running a workshop there, and then he's coming to Auckland next week to run a 2-day workshop there, and then he's having a small holiday in New Zealand. Again, apologise that to the Australians, but chosen to bring his family to New Zealand, and then he'll be running a last workshop in Wellington on the 14th or 15th of October. Right, as part of our relationship with Felix, we're happy for anyone who's on the webinar who would like to attend one of those events to communicate with Marika, and we're happy to offer you a discount.
Yeah, and similarly too, if anyone's looking at maybe an upcoming procurement or doing any sort of planning of their own, Ross, you're available to sort of help with that process in terms of the work you're doing with Pareto as well. So it's not just for New Zealand listeners. We've got there's plenty of value that Ross can offer to the Australian. You're at the Gold Coast recently, speaking at the PASA event, so you're sort of here fairly regularly as well.
Absolutely, and probably as say any communication or any particular questions has come via Marika. Bear in mind it's on the screen now. That makes it easy. But my email address is ross.darrah@pareto-toolbox.com.
Cool, and we'll be sharing these slides. Remember, guys, so you'll get the all the details. So just as a bit of a summary, just as what we've taken from today. So obviously, Lean-Agile Procurement, does it work? I think the answer is yes, but more importantly, it's looking at when can it work, when's the best environment, and how to actually do those 3 Ps. Plan, prepare, do. How to actually set it up properly so that it does work. So in summary, we're looking at it as being that collision of the three worlds with Lean, Agile, and Procurement. It's best used when the solution is uncertain, but the need is clear. And that involves, collaborating with vendors and business stakeholders. I mentioned at the beginning, we do a lot of that with our clients and prospective clients, going in and actually doing scoping workshops to work out, okay, how can we tailor a solution to, a clear business need? And also, again, the transparency and feedback that can be enhanced throughout those Lean Agile Procurement event is obviously a huge benefit for all parties involved, and then leaves sort of no surprises or potential issues following, that selection of a supplier. So we've got some questions that have come through. I think a couple have been answered. So yes, we'll be providing the slides afterwards. There was a question that Ross answered around, with the competitors in the same room, does IP become an issue? I think, Ross, you answered that before in saying that they just simply don't have time to go and steal anyone's ideas or change their own. I think with the transparency, probably wouldn't allow them to do that anyway.
I think also, IP can be a little bit overrated when it comes to these agile events, because remember, we don't actually know what we want. We just know the question, right? So when you use that sort of critical thinking analysis, like situation, complication, question, and answer, we actually don't know the answer. So by getting competitors in the room, having that conversation, the answer kind of falls out. I've also seen not a Lean Agile Procurement event, as I've just talked about, but Douglas Pharmaceuticals took this a slightly different way, and they had a problem around their storage of all their files and all their important material and descriptions they needed for their products and the like. So they ran a Lean Agile event just around business requirements, and said, well, why would we actually try and work out the answer ourselves when there are expert suppliers out there and know the answers? So they used a similar principle where they got two competitors in the room and said, we've got this problem, marketplace, give us some advice of how we could how we could solve it. And they got a lot better outcome out of that than what they had done, I say, by trying to work it out themselves.
Yeah, great. Okay, we've got obviously with the Auckland Council example, we've got a couple of or a number of government procurement people that have registered for today, but a couple of questions around Lean-Agile Procurement for government or local government as well. First question here, how open do you find governments in NZ and Australia are in including Agile procurement in their best practice toolkit?
At a macro level, the government is a very big decision maker. So it's more about how open you find individuals working in the public sector to this type of thinking. What I can tell you is, talking about New Zealand specifically, everything I've explained fits very comfortably inside the sourcing rules, which is how public money should be spent in New Zealand. You would have seen in my intro that I spent 3 years in public health, running the National Procurement Program for the hospitals in New Zealand, and so knew the sourcing rules very well. Conscious there's an updated version of that, but what we've talked about can operate within that quite comfortably. And hence part of why we're also bringing Mirko to Wellington, which has been supported by MB to help people think about going to market in a different way. And I'm sure that would apply to Australia as well, but it's not a government-led conversation, it's really an individual department-led conversation on down to a team-level conversation.
Yep, okay. A question about the Lean Agile Procurement Canvas. Do you have one canvas for all suppliers or one per supplier? Do each supplier fill out their own?
One canvas for all suppliers.
For all suppliers, okay.
Yeah. So they get to see what's important and therefore what's their proposition that they bring for each of those important boxes.
Yep. And also, is it recommended to have a probity advisor present during the sessions?
Public sector, the answer is always yes. Just from a point of view, you don't want to get tripped up later on and have to undo some good work that you've already done.
Yep.
Private sector, not so much.
Yep. Yeah, are you able to give us a bit more, with the Auckland example, are you able to give us a bit more insight into sort of potentially some of the roles, like who was involved from Auckland's side in terms of maybe like, procurement, or was it, like a probity advisor or like someone within management, someone within just as an example of the type of roles who were present?
Probably this way I described it, Andrew, it was a cross-functional team, right? So yes, there were people from different departments, but there was also, so naturally all the shared services such as ICT, procurement, the like were represented. But data goes across multiple business units, if you like, within the council, so they were represented. And that was one of the good things about it. You got that cross-fertilisation of conversation across the council and not just inside the council, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. Got another good question here around the contracting framework. So at what point does the contracting framework get developed and implemented, and how is the contract formed?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Answer that question. You can do that two ways. The best, once again, this is about speed and haste. You can actually have the contracting framework provided as part of your invitation to attend the event, and getting the supplier to, if they have any concerns or changes to that, they have to register that before the event, because at the end of the event, you want this all wrapped up as quickly as possible. And so hence why when agile events work well, the legalese surprisingly can happen just as quick as the negotiation can happen. It's all about doing the work up front as opposed to having that long lagging conversation with lawyers and the like at the end of it.
Yep, yep. And that sort of answers the next question here, which is, given the pace and information gathering over 2 days, is the weekend used for reflection and further questions, or is the decision made at the end of the 2 days? So I think you answered that in terms of having it all prepared up front so you can go through that, and the negotiations a lot more streamlined.
Absolutely, and bear in mind, so we ran this event on a Monday and a Tuesday, and we know that the suppliers did work over the weekend to get prepared for it.
Yep. Greg's just asked a follow-up question to the contracting, or how you've had a contracting framework. So would you have someone keeping the contract up to date as you negotiate in the event?
Because the major terms and conditions would already be agreed. So you're only really talking about the appendices of what any other things that may fit into the SLA or the pricing schedule or other things like that.
Yep. Okay. Got one here again, sort of going back to local government. As local government's limited in raising funds, example with rate capping and with a focus on strategic asset management, have you been able to apply lean agile procurement? For example, with Auckland Council? Yes, we have. Probably a good follow-on question would be any other councils or government organisations that you've worked with?
Yeah, so bear in mind, this is still quite fresh in New Zealand. Auckland Council chose data management as the first proof of concept. Out of that now, as I said earlier, they're looking to run up to 20 different events, and that will grow as people or team members get more confident within it. Also, we know Auckland University ran a Lean Agile event for a customer call centre, right? And that was a very successful event as well. And to say this is the snowball starting to move as such. People are seeing opportunities, seeing how it can work, how they need to adapt it to their own culture and other things, and become more and more prevalent. Yep.
Another question here. We talked about the probity advisor being present in the workshop. The question is, can you foresee any probity issues with Lean Agile Procurement being used within government organisations, and what may be the typical feedback from probity advisors? So are there any common sort of concerns or issues that you guys have addressed or see generally?
The answer is no, but that's with a qualification. Depends on who your probity person is. So by socialising this and getting them well trained and prepared beforehand, we'll avoid those type of situations. Yep. Naturally, if you don't socialise it, you don't train your probity person, he could pull his green pen out at any time and trip you up on something.
Yep.
But if you, and most organisations are using the same probity person all the time, so you know what they're always looking for, and you just have to be 2 steps in front of them to make sure you are well prepared to answer that.
Yep, brilliant. Another follow-up question from Greg, is the pricing shared between the suppliers?
No.
Oh, okay.
It could be, depending on scenarios, but in most cases, no. You don't need to, it's not you don't open your kimono completely and be completely transparent. There's still some things you do that. I think, and the other point to add, and with Auckland Council in that case study, all the 3 suppliers that were invited to bid for this piece of work were already incumbent suppliers to Auckland Council, So they already knew it's not like one was the incumbent and we had 2 new players coming in. They were actually 3 suppliers that had relationships already, had some understanding, and therefore were pitching for an additional piece of work.
Yep.
And hence why some of these questions around your master service agreement, like that was already in place,
Okay. Yep. And I suppose a question from me, are there any instances over the 2-day workshop where one supplier pitches or discusses with council, the client, and then the other 2 leave the room, or is everyone sort of in there for the whole workshop?
Not for the whole workshop, for different parts of the workshops. So there is some opportunity where you have an open forum, and other opportunities you have private forum.
Yep.
So when it comes to pricing, for example, that would all be done in a private forum. The other suppliers would be sitting out in, outside as such. But then for general conversation, you can see why you'd have all 3 in there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then, another question that's come through. So the cost structure field is just looking at price certainty rather than the details of the price.
Again, it just depends on what you're actually procuring at the time, how relevant that that thinking is. But
yep.
Hence why this doesn't work for widgets. This actually works for more of a service provider. So.
Yep. Okay. And then another question that's come through from Farah. What's the adoption rate so far of Lean Agile in procurement?
I would say the level of interest, and we've been able to demonstrate this by the number of participants in the webinar, is high as far as what is it, how could we use it, because we're looking to do something differently. The honest answer is how many people have done it is low.
Yeah.
And so we're still very much at that thought leadership. And I talk about awareness, attractiveness, and action. There's a lot of people wanted to be aware of it. There's a number of people are now starting to get quite attractive for it, but haven't necessarily gone and done it yet.
Yeah.
So the other way to look at it, you just need to go on, look at how many RFPs are in the market, and that's a disproportionately high versus the number of Lean Agile events.
Okay. So if someone listening today is interested in I suppose planning or looking at the option of doing one of these events, apart from speaking to yourself, what's the sort of the first step they can take, and maybe sort of socializing it within their business, or I suppose what would be your recommendations for, I suppose, the first step to take?
Well, first of all, they need to look how it fits into their overall procurement strategy, which is pretty much how we provide in that service to our businesses to manage our suppliers to achieve our business objectives. Then secondly, then you look at your work plan, if you like, that you've got planned for the next 12 months, and then segment them as we showed earlier in that slide to say, do we have any suitable spend or opportunities coming up in order to do that. And then the third thing is getting an executive sponsor to sponsor such an event. Those are the strategic thinking parts of it, Andrew. And then once those things are lined up, you've got all that aware, then okay, how do I get coached, or how do I actually work out how I'm going to do this?
Yep.
You may well already have Scrum Masters inside your organisation, and so they would be able to give you some advice where to start and how to start.
Yep. Cool. Another question's come through. This is a good one. Are there any examples that you've got of a Lean Agile procurement event that you've done, or another case study that you've heard about in Australia?
Yeah, so if you look at, if you're going back to the slide, become a Lean Agile Procurement Expert, a couple of ones ago, you'll notice there, that one there, you'll see that it's got Mirko Kleiner's name on that slide. If you go onto Google and you Google Mirko Kleiner, or you go on LinkedIn and link with him and myself, you'll find there's a whole lot of material that you can read and digest about this.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that Mirko is doing a couple of workshops today, isn't he?
Today is in Sydney, but
yep.
We can give you Mirko's email address. Happy to share that. There's no secret with that. But as I say, the easiest thing is if you Google Mirko, then you'll actually find his website and all his material that's on there. And he's got a very good case study about how he helped a client of his select an ERP supplier in 3 days, and that actually won a European awards from SIPS,
wow.
Chartered Institution Purchasing and Supply in the UK.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions that we've had come through. If anyone's got any questions, please don't be shy, throw them through. But Ross, thanks so much. From behalf of us, we've been great having you as a part of the webinar. I think from a vendor's perspective, it's amazing to hear about the opportunities to sort of be a part of some of these workshops. So we'd love to chat to anyone listening here that is potentially looking for procurement software, to have a chat to us, or interested in learning more about Felix. But of course, if you're as we saw before, there's a lot of people who are interested in potentially doing a workshop or chatting to Ross. Please get in touch with him, and we'll keep the conversation going. But thanks so much for today, Ross. Been great having you as part of the webinar.
Cool, my pleasure, Andrew, and have a good day, everyone.
All right, thanks, guys. Again, we'll share these slides. We'll share some of the Q&A responses, but any questions, please feel free. Details are at the end here. So thanks again for participating, and hopefully speak to a lot of you soon.
You there?